the easiest way to create polarizing content, which is talking about relationships, because relationships been around before we were here and they're going to be around well after we're gone, right? So it's like relationships are always going to be a thing. People are going to continue to struggle with relationships. So if you are just trying to get out there and just put out polarizing content right away, sure, go ahead and create some controversial relationship stuff, right? But if you are not trying to dabble in that space, I want to give you that hope that there is still ways for you to create that polarity, and it's just pick a side. Again, there's a side to every single coin.
All right, so welcome to the Callum Johnson Show. On today's episode, we have Quiy. What do I even call you? Quiy the Producer?
Quiy the Producer, Quiy Speaks, Quiy the man of many talents. But Quiy is fine though. Yeah,
You're actually a man of many talents. That is true.
Yeah, master of few. But
that's how you want it, to be fair. That's how you want it. Okay, cool. So I'll give a bit of the breakdown on you. I'll give the intro on you.
Okay.
So director and producer specializing in creative content creation, organic growth strategies and content monetization. Started out doing music videos, weddings, promo videos, now moving very much into the realm of podcasting. I think really where I found out about you and like probably the biggest thing that you're working on now is you're the producer of the Hardly Initiated podcast.
Mm-hmm.
You've obviously got the $1 Million Mind podcast, which you're the host of as well.
Mm-hmm.
And really, to be honest, man, like I look at you as like, when it comes to podcasting and especially understanding not just the content, but everything behind the scenes, you're like the guy for that. So you know what, where I really wanted to start out, because obviously, even when I see the Hardly Initiated pod, I think what you guys do really well is you guys have a bunch of viral content.
Yeah.
A lot of your content gets a lot of views, a lot of impressions. It really starts debates and conversations. So really where I wanted to start, and you can kind of give this game to the audience,
mm-hmm.
is how do you guys think about making content go viral? What is kind of like the strategy behind that that's turning the wheel? This episode is brought to you by Free Agency. If you want to take your career to the next level, Free Agency is a company that you should check out. They manage and represent talent in the tech industry, and they provide you with a dedicated talent agent to help you find, engage, and win top of market roles that will maximize your earning potential. No more leaving money on the table. Stop job searching alone and start building your dream career today with Free Agency. Anyway, back to the show. Give it to us.
That's a great question, Callum. And man, first off, I got to say I appreciate you for, inviting me out here to have the conversation. Man, you and I have been, chatting it up for quite a while, and I think it was just a matter of time before we got on here. But to answer your question, bro, to break it down in the simplest way possible, as a content creator, you have to do a really good job of understanding your avatar, right? And we all hear that word avatar, and I'm not talking about those little blue people. I'm not even talking about that little kid Aang, the last Airbender, right? I'm talking about an audience, like your target audience. Who is this person? And we break it down as an avatar, because the more specific you can get on who this person is and their identity, the more of a chance you have of getting that viral factor in your content, because you start to create content that speaks directly to that person, right? So if my avatar's name is Callum, I need to know, what is Callum like? Where does Callum like to go to eat? What types of friends do he has? What type of music does he like to listen to? What does he do for a living? What does he like to do outside of what he does for a living? Like, if you can get really specific and answer those questions, you get the idea of what even ticks Callum off. What really resonates with Callum? What makes Callum happy, sad, emotional? What makes Callum, at the end of the day, look at this video and feel emotionally connected to it, to want to comment and even take it a step further to share to their circle. And that's how you get that viral factor, is by speaking to that one person. And a lot of times, most of us, when we create content, you hear it all the time. Oh, when people say, I want to start a podcast. What do you want to start a podcast about? Oh, I want to talk about everything. You can't talk about everything. If you talk about everything, you're going to reach nobody, right? You got to be very meticulous on who you're talking to and how you want that person to react emotionally to that content.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, no, I think that's important. And I think the second piece of what you said is very important as well. It's like the emotional reaction, because it really starts with the emotions. But I want to start deeper with like the avatar stuff, because I know for me, when I started out, and also when I have conversations with prospects or clients, getting really clear on that avatar is difficult.
It's hard.
It's hard. It's hard. Sometimes you can even have it in your mind, but it's hard to put like words to it and really understand them. So how does someone even go about choosing like, okay, this is the person who's really going to resonate with my content. This is the person who's going to get the most value from my content. What is that journey?
I think that journey goes with you understanding that that person changes as much as you change too. So as content creators, we can get very stagnant too with the type of content we want to create. So I just want to challenge people to get out there, you know, have conversations, because the more conversations you have off the wax, off the tape, you know, just in person from going to networking events, you start to meet people like, this person kind of reminds me of my avatar, right? And then you just start to learn about this person, what changes that they're going through, you know, what big life events happened in their life that made them think a certain way when they used to think this way. So like really understanding that is a part of the journey. So to answer your question, I want people to understand is like, it's not a one size fits all. And then even if you now have your avatar and you know who this person is, it's not even going to be the same person next year. It's like, you have to always be, you know, looking at your comments, looking at your analytics, gauging your audience, challenging your audience to see like what's changing. Are they staying the same or are they growing? Because at the end of the day, even when you create your content should be changing your audience. Like they should be growing from your content, right? And if they're not growing, they're devolving, and you don't want that. And I think a lot of people nowadays are creating content that is making their audience devolve, where a lot of people are taking a step backwards when they consume content. But when you're doing it the right way and you create content, your audience should be growing from your content. And if that's what they should be doing, they'll definitely be a different person that they were when they first came to you. So you got to always be, you know, looking at the changes in your audience, what they're going through, so that you can stay fresh on, again, creating that content that draws them in emotionally.
Yeah. You know what? That's such a good point. And I think one thing I've realized just getting into this game even more is a lot of the times you don't realize this when you're watching your favorite content creators, but they're really obsessed about their audience. And
they got nicknames for them.
Yeah.
You know, they're doing giveaways, all kinds of stuff to get engagement.
Yeah, 100%. Like they spend so much time with their audience, like thinking about how they can even bring like new content ideas that speak very much to the avatar, but they're fresh and innovative. And it's funny because I even remember seeing Alex Cooper, who she's the host of Call Her Daddy, which is obviously like a massive podcast, like one of the biggest podcasts.
Yep.
And obviously there's a lot of like comedy. They say like a lot of wild shit and all this stuff. And she has like charisma, like she's entertaining. So I think that's what people focus on. But I remember seeing a clip from an interview when she was talking about like how much she obsesses over the audience. Like I think she literally said that. She's like, I'm obsessed about my audience. Like I do everything for the audience. I guess the next thing I want to know then, we know that you have to understand who your avatar is. You have to commit to the process of being like obsessed about that person. Like, what do they care about? What are their needs? All of these things so that you can speak to them. Where does the virality piece and where do the listeners come in?
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people are like, okay, I'm clear on who I want to target. Who's my dream customer even?
Yeah.
But how do I reach them? And how do I reach them in a way where like they're going to tell other people?
Yeah.
Like, go follow him.
So we talked a little bit about just that emotional resonation, like just resonating with your audience. And, you know, there are a couple ways that you can do that. But I find the most efficient way to get that resonation is by forcing people to make a stance. Like, I think a lot of times when we create content, especially people who are a little wary of creating content, they just kind of want to do it, but they don't love the idea of being in front of a camera, you know, reaching millions of people. Now stepping into like the world kind of knows their business. That's a little scary for people. And people like that kind of just tiptoe into content creation. So they're most likely not going to make stances that force people to pick a side, right? It's a lot of, I think, and this is what I would do, but you have to change the language altogether. It has to be, this is the only way. If you're not doing this, you're that. It's like making people pick a side, because even at the worst case, it's not the worst case, right? Even if people disagree with you, people who disagree with you strongly are most likely going to comment and share more than the people who really agree with it, right? Which is why 90% of people who leave reviews on TripAdvisor or what's the DoorDash or Yelp, they're negative comments, right? It's because the negative is what moved you to even want to make the comment in the first place. It's the same thing with content, right? It's the same thing. And when we are too scared to make those polarizing statements, the matter of fact, it's either black or white, it's no gray, that is really doing us a disservice when it comes to being content creators, because people follow you because of your stance, not because you don't have a stance, right? It's like the news, they have a stance, and it's not, what do you think? They're not asking, you know, the viewers, what do they think? They're delivering the news, and they usually have a stance. It's either this or that. It's the same thing with content creation. It's just pick a side, stand on that side, and just hope for the best, I guess. But you know, you really got to pay close attention, honestly, to what your audience and how they react to it. But at the end of the day, you can't see that if you don't force them to pick a side.
No, I like that. And I think I feel like a lot of the best content creators, I think I wrote a tweet about this actually. A lot of the best content creators are like naturally polarizing. And I think the reason why, it kind of comes back to being authentic. Like if you're with like your boys or like your close friends, like people that you really trust,
you probably
saying some like controversial shit. Just because you're like, but that's because you're being authentic. You're being like who you actually are. Here's the thing though. I know for a lot of, especially entrepreneurs, and you even mentioned it, which is like, I have like a brand, or I have a business, or even if you work a job, it's like, I'm not trying to be on the internet saying like some stuff that could like be interpreted, especially when we're dealing with like cancel culture, and how the way that things live on the internet, where they kind of stay alive and they're reposted and all of these things. And so I want to bring it back to the Hardly Initiated podcast, because obviously the two hosts there, they have a business, and but you guys very much play into that controversy. Like how do they balance that? How do they make it? And has there even been like stories of like the content is having like an adverse effect, I don't know, on like relationships or whatever?
That's interesting, because right when we were first making the transition from real estate to full-time like entertainment and media company, I met those guys because I was a sales rep for them as far as like the real estate and the wholesale. So I remember getting a contract with one of these ladies, and she said, and of course, and this was like a upstanding lady, like she did her research about the company, and she was like, I saw one of your owners, you guys have a podcast. I was like, I already knew where this was going. I'm like, they got a podcast. She's like, I saw one of the owners of the company, he recently went pretty viral lately. And I'm like, she's like, I like that. And it just so happened that this was, and even despite that she was technically the person that he was talking about, right? This was back when he had a clip that went viral about high earning women are less attractive, right? And this was a high earning woman that I'm talking to, and she just happened to agree kind of what he was saying, not to every extent, but for the fact that she herself found it hard to date because she was a high earning and high achieving woman. And so we ended up bonding over that, though. We ended up being able to have a conversation and talk about that. So it didn't necessarily have an adverse effect, but I could have seen how the conversation could have took a different turn had she had different views and a different outlook on that statement. So that was like the only example that stood out on how their content, because it was going viral, was starting to leak into business. Fortunately enough, we ended up dissolving that business and putting all the chips into the media company. So now it was just a part of the business, right? That like everything was just a part of it. And anyone else that we ended up networking with, they were in the same space, understood, and were doing the same things, the same strategies, same tactics. So it never really happened. It was where it had an adverse effect, but it can. And I can understand again how content creators with businesses and with personal brands can get a little wary on the type of content you want to dabble in, and that's fine, right? Like my personal brand and my podcast is not a relationship podcast. It's not a relationship or controversy, type of content. So on my personal page, I stay away from that stuff.
Mm.
There's other ways to be polarizing and to be matter of fact when it comes to creating content outside of what we see now, the relationships. I think that is the scapegoat, right? A lot of people look at that, like when you are not a creative, a true creative, you jump into what's easy. And that's the easiest way to create polarizing content, which is talking about relationships, because, relationships been around before we were here and they're going to be around well after we're gone, right? So it's like relationships are always going to be a thing. People are going to continue to struggle with relationships. So if you are just trying to get out there and just put out polarizing content right away, sure, go ahead and create some controversial relationship stuff, right? But if you are, not trying to dabble in that space, I want to give you that hope that there is still ways for you to create that polarity, and it's just pick a side. Again, there's a side to every single coin. There's a side in politics. There's a side in obviously relationships. There's a side in business. There's a side in networking. There's a side in creating events and planning. And there's a side. Every coin has two sides. It's black and it's white. Pick one, put that content out, and make your audience pick a side with you. Whether it's black or white, it doesn't really matter. Yeah.
You know what? Actually, I'm interested to get deeper into this because I think it'll be interesting for the audience. Which is, you mentioned obviously, so on Hardly Initiated, they get kind of spicy.
They get very spicy. Yeah. Sometimes I'm even like sitting behind the desk. And I'm like,
you're like, whoa,
we about to go there? Oh man, that's tough. Yeah, it gets crazy.
It gets spicy on there. So, and you mentioned obviously on the $1 Million Mind, you're not. You may have like polarizing opinions, but not in that realm.
Not in that realm at all. I usually, so as a host, I usually am trying to pull the polarity out of my guests. I'm usually trying to say like, okay, so if you're doing it that way, what does that say about the people doing it this way? And try to pull it out that way. So like, you just have to be cognizant of these things, even if you're not the guest and you're delivering the content, even if you're just hosting. That's how you learn how to deliver better questions, is just understanding the polarity, because even that will drive your questions. You start asking way more in-depth, open-ended questions and a lot less closed-ended questions and surface level questions as well.
And so, you know what, it gets me interested, because I guess the point is there, because you're not saying like the controversial shit yourself, and you're not like really playing into it, does that put a cap on the success of your podcast? And kind of here's where I want to go with it, because I was listening to Andrew Schultz on Flagrant 2. I don't know if you know Andrew Schultz. Obviously he's a comedian, killing it, like millions of views, like one of the biggest podcasters. And in one of the recent episodes, he does another podcast with Charlemagne the God, the Brilliant Idiot.
Yeah.
And they were talking about like what makes a great podcast, because at this point Charlemagne has his own podcast network. And I think some of the characteristics that Schultz said, he was like, you need to have strong opinions, you need to be like entertaining, have charisma, like a unique viewpoint. And so I'm curious from your perspective, because you have a very interesting vantage point where like you're in front of the camera because you're a host of your own one, but then you also see it from behind the scenes on a hugely popular podcast. So if you had to say, what would you say are the characteristics of someone who's like just going to kill it in the podcast game?
I would say the same thing. Like, they are 1000% right. Like, have your own point of view. Don't be afraid to share your point of view. Like, even if you're a host and a guest says something that you disagree with, don't be shy to say, nah, I'm gonna challenge you there. Like, have your own personality. You don't always have to say, I disagree, and just be so kind of like this. A lot of people think when they hear host, they put on this fake persona. It's like I have to look and sound like a newscaster or sportscaster. Just put on this fake persona of themselves when you could still absolutely be yourself. Like, I still talk with my slang. I still, challenge people how I would challenge people in real life, when we're having conversations. It's the same me, so you still just be yourself. But there are things that you want to work on, how to deliver punchlines, how to have your personality, stand out amongst other strong personalities. Because if you're doing your job on your show, you're trying to get personalities in yourself. Right? You don't want to be the biggest personality of a show that you host. You want to continuously bring in personalities that are either equal or bigger than you. Because that's how you really, again, get that polarity, because it's like a magnet. You're bouncing off of each other. So that would be the advice that I would give, just to kind of second that. But they're absolutely right. Like, those are characteristics you want to have the success. But I don't think that there's any cap, right? Like, abundance is our birthright. Like, from birth, we were promised abundance in our potential, right? There are still things we have to do to unlock and to achieve that abundance, but everyone is entitled to abundance. So it's no cap on how successful anyone can be, but you have to always be growing, challenging yourself, challenging your audience, learning and doing different things when you see that the things you're currently doing aren't working. But I will say that, when it comes to business podcasts versus the entertainment podcast or the relationship podcast, they are a lot harder to grow. It means you have to just put in that work. And if it's something that you really want to do, you just understand that, okay, this is a ride I have to be willing to be on for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, or however long it takes for it to really blow up. But even then, success is relative. For some people, success will be, I have millions of downloads a month. For other people, success could be, I just want my podcast to be able to help me, do this full time and just make five to 10 grand a month. Whatever it looks like for you is different.
Yeah. No. So obviously, I'll give some context to the audience. Obviously, like, we've had like a bunch of conversations, and I think you've really helped me, obviously, like, from the content, like strategizing the content and what I'm posting and all of that. But I actually think there's a completely different element that I didn't expect you to help me with, but you did.
Right.
Which is like the monetization piece.
Yeah.
Like, how do you make money doing this shit? Because unless you're getting, I think it's obvious to people, if you're getting like hundreds of thousands of listens or millions of listens, I think the monetization piece is it just comes naturally with like sponsorships or whatever. But what are some of the ways that people can like monetize their content, especially in the podcast space?
Yeah. The biggest way I would say is guest facing. So for podcasters, the easiest way to monetize your platform, with, minimum listenership, minimum viewership, is by guest facing, creating an offer that is valuable to the guest that you bring on. So you just got to really again, you have your audience avatar. Now you want to create a guest avatar. Like, who is the typical person that I want to get on my show and have a conversation with? Who is the typical person that will bring value to my audience? And then you look at this person, he's like, okay, here are the trends. These people typically either have businesses, and I'm speaking from my perspective, like, my guests usually have businesses. They usually have some type of coaching program or offer. They usually are also content creators themselves and are very active on social media. So you just look at that, and now you want to package together something that will be valuable to that person. So you can start making money as soon as you get your first guest on, right? You can get your first guest on whether you got two followers on IG or you got 200,000 followers on IG. You can literally start making money ASAP by creating some type of guest facing offer for your podcast. So that's one. Another way is a community. So I love the community play, because this is where you kind of get into that passive income. And that's creating an offer based on your audience. So now you're looking at who your audience is. And when you do it like this, you kind of want to envision like a funnel, right? Because each episode is an entry into the funnel. Every time somebody watches an episode, they have entered themselves into the funnel. And like a funnel, it starts from very wide at the tip or at the top, and then very narrow at the tip. So you're taking people from when they watch the episode to when they fulfill the call to action, whether it's hit the link in the bio and in the description, or they fill out that form, or they, go to the website to get that free gift that they had to put their name and email for, all the way down to where they click purchase of the first offer, and that could be a product, a service, or it could be the community. But again, creating that community is big, because it takes, the importance is you have to really know who your audience is, how to wrap that up, tie it with a bow, and present it to that audience to where it's attractive to them. And when done right, you can make anywhere from, I've seen content creators doing, $1,000 to, $10,000 a month off of a monthly subscription or a community play is what we call it.
I'm curious, like, so let's go deeper into the community play, because I think that's an interesting one. And I actually think both are interesting. And I remember actually, obviously I've heard about like a lot of the audience, the ways to monetize an audience.
Yeah.
Before I spoke to you, I didn't hear much about the guest monetization. That was definitely unique. And I think it's good for people that are like starting out, that you're just building the audience. It's a way that you can instantly monetize. But let's talk about the community play. How can someone, how do you even think about building that, and like what things you should be offering, and what would even be like attractive to your audience, especially because at the beginning, I find you're almost still kind of figuring out who your audience is. There's probably like a variability in like your viewership numbers. You have some episodes, especially if you do an interview-based podcast, you'll have some episodes that go off, and then some that get very little traction.
Very little traction.
And so I think when that is the dynamic, it becomes difficult to even see it as a community, because you're kind of like, it comes and then it goes, and you're still figuring so many things out. So what is that process where like you can figure out what your offer is, and then you can start to build like a community around your product, around the podcast, around about the different offers that you're giving to people as well?
Yeah. So first, how do you figure it out? You start by looking at what already exists. So you start to look around you and you see everyone offers subscriptions. Netflix, Hulu, Disney Plus. Even nowadays, we got car wash subscription. Like the car wash offers unlimited washes for like $35 a month. So it's like subscriptions are now becoming a thing, and people find the value in it because of the convenience. You know, being able to get a full service, or, you know, some type of value at like this one prime monthly rate. They don't have to worry about this a la carte thing, because more options and a la carte things people think is more expensive. They have to also figure out if they're making the right choice. Like, if I get this, what if I really found out I needed that? And it gives them a lot of hesitation just off of not knowing, just like, am I making the right choice? So you don't want to paralyze, give them analysis paralysis. You want to give them a very easy buy this. And that's why I'm a big proponent of like just offering the community is like what I post publicly. Most people just see that I offer the community. It's not until you're in the community that you have an option to even shop with me and buy other things, because I don't want any confusion. I don't want any analysis paralysis. I just want you to come in, and that's again part of the funnel. It's just giving them one option, one button, one play. You run it or you don't. But for the people who do run it, now you get into the community and you get into the space and see that there's so many other options for you to succeed. So that's my mindset and how I look at it. Can I say that that's the only way to do it? It's not, but it's the best way that worked for me and a lot of other smaller podcasters, right? It gives them that control, right? Because you don't have to have consistently thousands and tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of views to be able to make money. And to be able to do things that a lot of other people who have these crazy views, they're able to do. You're able to do it with a smaller audience. So that's one. The second thing I would say is, how do you find your audience when you have this this sporadic stagnation? And again, that goes off of the content that you put out also on social media, right? Like you shouldn't just be leveraged. You shouldn't be just on one platform. It's like, yes, so YouTube is what houses my long form content. And for sake of the conversation, I'm going to call it the bread, right? YouTube houses the bread. That's the bakery. But, you know, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube Shorts, TikTok, that's where I chop up that bread and I deliver my breadcrumbs. And that's where you have that more engaging audience. So even though a video might only do like 14 or 20 views sometimes on YouTube, a clip from that video will do like 11 to 20,000 views on Instagram. And I'm able to gauge interest and I'm able to learn about my audience from that. So that's what advice I would give to content creators, is not be discouraged by YouTube, because YouTube's a different algorithm. And the thing about YouTube is they gatekeep so hard. It's like, just to be able to have your videos naturally and organically do 1,000, views consistently, you have to be on the platform at least 5 years. It's like they have this seniority complex on YouTube. It's like the people who've been on there the longer, they get all the play. They're the ones on the homepage. So like they live for the homepage because they have built credibility and trust with YouTube of putting out good content and being consistent with putting out that content over 5 year span. I've only been on YouTube a year and a half, 2 years. And even in that, I've taken hiatuses where I've like breaking up my seasons from like 3 to 5 months. So like I'll have season 1, season 2, and then I'll be gone for 5 months until I put out season 3. So that also hurts. It doesn't really help, especially as a new platform. It doesn't help you, going MIA for 5 months. So I don't advise that. These are things that I'm learning as well. I don't advise that for new creators. Like once you make that decision to go on YouTube, you want to find a way to be putting out 2 to 3 videos a week on YouTube to, really get that algorithm going. And then also using different tools to make sure that your titles and your descriptions are search engine optimized.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the biggest thing.
That's actually something else. I learned from you. Is like using like the TubeBuddy and like all of this stuff to make
AI, you got vidIQ, TubeBuddy, Bard AI, which is owned by Google. ChatGPT, AI is changing the game, and to give context, I don't want people to think that you run with the AI, because I'll use AI to come up with a title, but you still got to know your audience. Now they don't fully know my audience, so they'll give me a title and I'm like, they're giving me a start, but that's not quite what I want. Tweak it a couple things in the prompt, and then I'll finally tweak the wording of the, but it's good for that writer's block, or that when you just can't really think how to even start the creative process of coming up with that title or coming up with that description. That's when those tools are really helpful.
Yeah, the way that I break it down for people is I think AI can take you from, I call it like the 0 to 80%. Like if you're looking at like completion, it can take you from 0 to 80. The final like 80 to 100%, where it's like ready to publish, that's kind of when you need like a human. That's when you need a human involved. But that 0 to 80% piece is still a huge thing.
It's crucial.
And I think that's the thing that sometimes people, unless you're doing a pod, you don't realize like how much work is going behind the scenes. Yeah. And I always say to people, like every time you go on a different channel, it's like a separate workflow.
Separate. And man, let me just give the podcasters some game too. Stop putting, I know we like to do it, but stop putting episode 20 in the title. That does not help the algorithm. Like that does not help you on the algorithm. You just need to know who your audience is and make statements in the title. Like the title is for you to make that first polarizing statement, not for you to tell people this is episode 20 and we're talking with this guest that nobody's ever heard of, and this is what we're talking about. That title is trash. It just is what it is. You got to use that title. It's like, that's your first impression. So if somebody's first impression was like, you meet somebody for the first time and it's like, hey, I'm Quiy. I do this for a living and this is what I do. And I've been doing this for 5 years. And they just start talking about this and where they are in their life. Is like, dude, you just told me everything I need to know. I don't need to talk to you ever again after this. Right. But if your first impression was like, yeah, I'm Quiy and I consider myself a connector. It's like, what do you mean by that? What do you mean you call yourself a connector? Like, what is that? It sparks a conversation. So I'm not saying that that's a great YouTube title either. I'm just saying you want to leave some type of mystery that makes people want to click and ask that question. Like, what is this about to be about? Or this triggered me, and how can I find out more? That's the whole purpose of that title space.
The way I put it is like, you want to spark curiosity. I remember actually I did a course, like a copywriting course, and the creator Sean Puri, he was talking about writing on Twitter, and he said what you want to do is you want to create like a curiosity gap. So you want to like almost like start the conversation but not finish it. And then in order for the person to finish it, they have to read your content or they have to watch your content. But you're just starting something. Especially when you have like limited, like the title is a perfect example because you have limited characters.
And they say you have up to like 110 characters, but you really don't want to go past 75, 80.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what, actually, I'm interested because I think this will be it'll be interesting for the audience, and it'll be interesting for people that are starting out and they're on that hustle of trying to build something. Because at this point, I think, and even I have this when I look at big podcasts, like say I go on Earn Your Leisure, or I look at 19 Keys or Charlemagne or Revolt, or like even like some of the big tech podcasts. I look at the All In podcast, or I look at My First Million. At the point that they're at, especially if you're just a consumer, everything they do looks successful because they've reached a certain level of scale. So like if they post a clip, it's getting a minimum of like, I don't know, 2,000 likes and like tens of thousands of views.
Hundreds of thousands of views.
Yeah, like it seems easy. And I guess Hardly Initiated is reaching that point as well, where like if you went on their Instagram, even like a poor performing clip for you guys is probably getting like over 10,000, right? At this point.
Well, that's a really bad clip, right? Yeah. 10,000. I mean, even like on the okay day, a clip on Instagram is doing about 50 to 75,000.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But talk to me about some of those, like those early days with Hardly Initiated, where it was like you were still figuring shit out. You were dropping like certain videos, certain interviews or conversations that were like not duds in terms of the conversation, but in terms of like the views. And I'm curious how even like the progression was. Was it kind of like straight out of the gate, people were just rocking with it and it was like up, up, up? Or were there like months where it was like down or flat? Like what was even that early experience like?
Man, I would say for the most part, from the gate, I'm not saying from the gate was it millions of views, but from the gate, we knew we were in the space that we wanted to stay in because it was like controversial relationship stuff. And again, like when it comes to the relationship stuff, is like super, I'm not going to say it's easy, but the formula is super simple. It's a very simple formula. You follow it and that's it. You know, you should expect a certain result. But I would say what
would you say that formula is?
Ticking people off.
Yeah.
You know, being very controversial, being very matter of fact, saying things that mostly will, you know, emotionally tick off with the women for the most part. You know, and if you are a business owner, and most business owners will second this, we're in a time where if you have a product or service, or even your content is a product or service, you want to target Black women as your main audience. So when Black women are your main audience, you're going to get a lot of traction because Black women are at the forefront of the economic, you know, even corporations right now, they're targeting Black women, you know, as their consumer. So it's the same thing with content. They're consuming the most content. They're consuming the most products and services. And so that was the formula that they stuck by, just finding ways to speak to or tick off the Black woman, essentially, right? And it might sound crazy, right, to say out loud, but that's the formula. And most people run that play, more people than you think. But I would say for the most part, the biggest downturn that we had was making the mistake of going off YouTube. And going back to what we said about that subscription. You know, there are many different types of ways to create an environment of a membership or subscription. One of the things we did was try to create an app and put all of our content on the app. That time we spent off YouTube kind of hurt, right? Not to say that we didn't make money from building that app, but it wasn't like we had about 900 people subscribe to that app paying all of like $14.99 a month, but it's still expenses that come with, you know, building the app and keeping the app functioning as well. To where when we started to see it slow down, noticing, okay, to keep the numbers running, we got to start running ads. And now you're building up more and more expenses. It's like, okay, after all these expenses, might as well just go back to YouTube. Things were not the same, right? The audience had to relearn us. Like the audience had to relearn us. YouTube had to relearn us. So it was a nice little 1 to 2 month gap where the content wasn't going crazy like we thought it would on YouTube. But once we figured out how to get it back going, and you know, you try that by putting out new concepts, new content, new guests, seeing which resonated with your audience, see which ones didn't, knowing if they didn't, to not do it again. You know, we don't delete it, but we just know, all right, we don't need to have these types of conversations again. We need to have more of these types of conversations. and then just running with that play. Always. It's always when you try something, you give it about a week, because when you've been doing it long enough, okay, it's been a day, it's been 2 days, this video already got this many views. This is either good or bad. So it's like you start to know, and then like, okay, this only did X amount of views, and it's only been 2 days, but the last time we put out a conversation, it did X amount of views in 2 days. That was way better than this one. We know not to have this type of conversation again, because it's clearly very different from this one, and our audience is responding more to this one. Just got to know how to ask yourself those questions and how to read the analytics. A lot of people post on YouTube, but how many people actually go into their YouTube studio and go to analytics and look at each one of those categories, from the content, the audience, the overview? Like, how many of you are realistically even on Instagram and Facebook, how many of us are really looking at our analytics, and do we even know how to pick apart that data and what to do with that data?
Damn, you're giving some good game here. Okay. You know what? I want to talk about growth, because one of the things that I know personally, I've seen it with other people that I've spoken to. There's a lot of people putting out a podcast. The numbers are stagnant or even at times declining, and they're incredibly frustrated. And frustrated to the point where they're almost like, fuck this. Like they don't want to even do the podcast anymore.
Yep.
And so here's the thing I want to know, right? Because you can have certain aspects of your podcast working, and still the underlying metric, which is probably the listens, is still not there. And here's what I mean. So you can have clips that are doing really well, getting great engagement, getting views on Instagram or TikTok, but that's not converting to downloads and listens or views on YouTube. You can have incredible guests that you're like, oh, okay, this person with their following coming on, like, this should kill, but you're still not getting listens. So you know what? Let's take each of those two buckets, but let's start with the clips. And here's the thing. I even said this to myself recently. I was like, because my clips are doing a lot better now. Like they're reaching a good point, and I also feel like my team and we're kind of seeing like what our gap is, like what our thing is, and the clips are performing well. But how do you take clips that perform well and turn that into listens? Because that's a completely different game. There's a difference between views and someone watching a 30-second clip on Instagram versus they're clicking on your 1 hour episode and consuming it. So even for you guys at Hardly Initiated, how do you think about it? Where like, okay, we had this clip go viral, but how are you capturing that into listens?
Yeah. It's all about the end card and the call to action at the end. Like, a lot of people don't properly use call to actions. And even to take a step backwards, when you spoke about the podcasters that get very frustrated and they end up stopping, that's the problem. They stop. When you see that decline, you're supposed to power through it. Like, you're supposed to pound it, put out more content, try new things. That's when you step up your game, because what you've entered is the valley of disappointment. And every business has it, where there's this valley where you're going to be disappointed because you're not seeing the numbers that you want to see. You're not seeing the revenue that you want to make. You're not seeing the traction or the traffic that you want coming through your doors. But to get through that valley, you got to push it. Now I'm going to ask you a question, Colin, right? You say you're on a bike and you are looking ahead and you see this huge steep hill. Your initial reaction is probably to get off the bike because you don't want to pedal up that steep hill, right?
Yeah.
That's what most people do. They get off the bike. But what they could have did was not noticing is that behind them, when they first traveled, was another hill. You got to start at that hill, looking ahead and seeing that valley and see that steep hill. And you got to pound through that hill so you get that momentum up. So now you're pedaling less harder and you're pedaling for less time, because you saw that you were getting ready to come down this hill and then you're getting ready to go up this steep hill. You got to push it. Most people are just going to cruise down that hill. But what you got to do is you got to change the gear up so you get more push, and you got to pound it through that hill so you can shoot up. So that's how that momentum works. And most people just cruise down the hill. They get to the bottom. They're in the valley of disappointment now at this point. and then they get off the bike trying to walk it up or just say, I'm just going to turn back around.
You know what actually I like, and I was thinking about this as you gave that analogy. It's also, you have to think about what's on the other side of that steep incline, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because when you go up a steep hill, there's also a decline on the other end.
It's going to be another valley of disappointment.
Yeah.
It's like seasons. It's like why people say, okay, in order for me to make my first 100,000, I had to lose 20,000. In order for me to make my first million, I had to lose 100,000. It's that they're talking about the valley of disappointment, that gap that they had to make that decline to shoot back up. And then, like you said, right on the other end, it might be flat for a little bit, but there's going to be the world is full of ups and downs and hills. There's no place where there's this bottomless pit and then there's nothing but up. It's going to be some type of pit coming right after. Same thing with stocks. Everything is about ups and downs. It's the balance. So it's like you have to almost look forward to the valley of disappointment, because in that you're going to learn what to do better. You're going to learn what to not to do again. You're going to learn where you need to increase your efforts. You're going to learn what activities and tasks you need to do more of, which ones you need to do less of. So you need to look forward to the valley. So it's like almost anticipating it, even when things are going really well. I don't want that to have a bad message, because I don't want people to all of a sudden just now have this mindset when things are going good, things are going to go sour and things are going to go bad. Because the valley of disappointment is called that because of the mindset, but it's not necessarily a bad thing.
You know, it's interesting actually. I saw a quote from Alex Hormozi, and what he said like, the best entrepreneurs tend to have two traits that seem in contradiction, but they have both of them. So the first one is they tend to have like a certain level of paranoia. Yeah. Paranoia that things can go bad. However, in the long term, they tend to be extremely optimistic. And so it seems kind of in conflict, because the paranoia is like you're expecting things to go bad, which seems inherently pessimistic. But then in the long term, you're like, oh, okay, everything's going to work out. But it's exactly what you say. You kind of have to be looking for the areas where like, where can my business fail? Where are we not, if it's content, where are we not delivering for the audience? And if you have that mindset, it's going to keep you pushing. Even when you said that you need to grow with your audience shouldn't be devolving. That's what's going to stop that from occurring. Okay, here's where I want to go. Because I think from our conversations, one thing that I kind of respect about you, and it's something that I'm trying to build as well, which is I feel like the way that we're building our life and especially our work, it's very intentional. And what I mean by that is, and I felt it certainly, is when I was working at like my 9-to-5 job, there were definitely moments where like I was just doing things, I guess, to get paid or to like feel like I'm progressing in this job. But it didn't ladder up into like the long-term outlook on like, what do I want to work on? Or like, what am I uniquely, like, what's my unique place where like I can add value, where like my skill set is going to make me just better at doing this thing than anyone else because it's something for me. And so when I look at the way that you're even building your life and career, you do a lot of work in like the media space, which I know you're like incredibly passionate about. Even a lot of like your sales skills are being utilized in what you do, what you're doing with Hardly Initiated. And I think back to people who are like early in their career, or not even early in their career, they're just trying to figure it out. And potentially they're working at like a 9-to-5, which they're like, I can do this thing, but it doesn't speak to me. Right. Like, it's not what I'm meant to be doing. Like, anyone could kind of plug in and out of this. Like, it's not what I'm meant to be doing. And I know, obviously, you started on like kind of like the 9-to-5, like hustle. So I want to know from your journey, like, what was even that transition? What were those early stages of figuring out, first of all, like what you wanted to be working on? And then how did you start to action against that? So once you saw it, how did you start to put the steps into place to actually get towards that life? Yeah.
I think the first step is identifying what the purpose and the mission is. Like, what fills your cup? What do you want to do for the rest of your life. And that, as far as the work, that might change, but as far as the purpose, that should be the same. That should be consistent. And then from there, you just have to work backwards. Like, what are the things that I need to do? What are the skills that I need that I don't already have? For me, I knew already, and this is how the thing evolves, right? I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. So at the end of the day, it don't matter if I want to be an entrepreneur in the video space or if I wanted to start my own company. I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. So with that, I identified that, okay, if you want to be an entrepreneur, you're going to need to know sales. So I knew that I needed to get into sales some type of way, and this is right around the time me and my wife, we moved to Miami in 2017. That's where I started my corporate work. And that's where I learned, even before then, a couple internships, I learned that I didn't want to be an accountant like I thought I was going to go to school for. I didn't want to work at a business or at a company for 40 plus years, to get a pension. I didn't want that lifestyle. But even identifying the opportunity to move to Miami for an operations job, that for me looked like something I had to do because it was going to get me out of Philadelphia. So that was the main thing. I was like, okay, I know I don't want to do this full time, like all the time, but it's going to get me out of the city, experience a new city, experience a new life and learn new things from there. That's exactly what happened in Miami. That's where I learned the passion of creativity, videography, right? That's where I started my first little mini podcast called Talented Tuesdays, which was literally an IG show that we ended up putting on YouTube later on, but it was like a very small scale podcast. But that's where I found that passion, and I found it in pretty much media production, media creation, like speaking to people through the media. That's where I found a passion. And then that purpose was to help people get from where they are now to where they want to be. So I knew what that purpose was. I knew what the passion was, AKA the vehicle. And then now you just have to figure out which are going to be the things that empower you to do more of that. And there are going to be times where you may not be able to do that all the time, but you have to at least, if you're not going to be able to do it in the 9 to 5, you have to at least be doing a 9 to 5 that will give you the energy to do it after the 9 to 5. What do I mean by that? If you're in a 9 to 5 that's draining you to the point where when you get home, all you want to do is lay down and watch TV and then go to sleep and get up and do it all over again, that's a toxic environment. You got to get out of that environment. Your 9 to 5, your job should make you feel motivated to do more, motivated to find more about yourself, motivated to get out and network with your coworkers because you see, oh, this person is working in this job with me, but they also have this passion. I see that alignment. Let me go spend time with this coworker, right? Like that's the environment. And I really dislike when I hear people say like, oh, adulting is this, or, that's just the responsibility. Like that is not your responsibility as an adult. Your responsibility as an adult is to take care of your health, to take care of yourself so that you can have that cup full and spill over into those people that are direct recipients of that cup being full, right? So like, it's not my responsibility to just get a job to pay bills. It's my responsibility to find opportunities that will provide me the lifestyle that I like and love, and also be able to fill that cup and spill over into the areas I want it to spill over to, like my wife, like my family, like my kids, like my craft, right? All these things, so whatever that looks like for people, whatever you want to do, even if you're not, let's say you want to be an entrepreneur, starting company Y, right? If you're not in that right now, you got to get this job. The job should be something that will give you a skill that will go towards company Y, or give you a connection that goes towards company Y, or give you the time freedom to start building company Y while at that company. But if it doesn't do one of those three things, then you have no business being at that job. You need to find another job, because that's the thing. It's an abundance of jobs. So like, even when people say, oh, I just had to get this just so I can get some money, it's like, you could have found any other job to get you some money that will also put you closer to your alignment. There are an abundance of jobs, even in a market that seems like it's tough, right? Like when I was looking for a new job, to make ends meet, because as an entrepreneur, when we talk about that valley of disappointment, there are moments where shit gets tough and you got to make the sacrifice and you got to go back into the workspace. But the first thing I wanted to communicate to my wife was like, okay, if I'm going to get this job, it has to be aligned with this, because one thing I don't want to sacrifice is the amount of time that I'm able to, spend with you and still being able to work on my craft. I don't want to sacrifice this. I don't want to sacrifice that. And, I know it was a tough conversation to be had, but one thing that I've appreciated the most is her understanding that and be like, okay, I get it. And then just showing her that I'm still putting in the work to find that job, whether it's a unicorn or not, it's still out there. It's available for me. And it might look like a unicorn for right now, but if you keep putting in the work and you keep doing the activities, you're going to find it. And I ended up finding it. So it's like, that's just a word for everybody. It's like, what we think is a unicorn, at the end of the day, they still exist. You just not doing enough work to find it, right? You're not looking in the right nook. You're not, searching under the right cranny. Like, you are not doing enough work. That's all it is. When we can't get to where we're trying to get to and we're frustrated with that, you need to be frustrated with the activities, because there's always more that you can be doing. Yeah,
no, that's so good. And you know what? One thing which you said, which is really important, is the abundance mindset. And I think a lot of the times the reason, and I know it for me, but for people as well, the reason that you feel so demotivated, demoralized, depressed about certain things, or like how your career is going or how life is going, is usually it's a lack of options. The reason it feels hopeless is a lack of options. You think that 9 to 5 that you have, that you don't enjoy, that you don't get energy from, that drains you, that you need an escape from, you think that's the only thing that you can do. There's no other job. There's nothing else. An interesting thing about the world, I think, when you start to put that intention out there and you start to move with an abundance mindset, it's like more things come to you, more opportunities, the right people kind of come into your life. And so I think a lot of the times in this podcast, and I love to make things like actionable for people.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it always just comes down to the mindset, to be honest. The mindset is really where it ends, because on the practical side of things, there's going to be times when things just don't work out. There's going to be times where if you're looking at the scoreboard, it looks like you're down like 20 at the half. And that's when, where do you fall back to? You fall back on the mindset. And I find the people that have that kind of abundance mindset, they just know it's going to turn around. Like that's where their mind goes. And that's what sparks the comeback. You know what? Here's where I want to end, because you spoke about, and I think this can be powerful for people. You spoke about moments where like the valley, what did you call it? The valley of...
Oh, the valley of disappointment.
Valley of disappointment. Yeah. Okay, I need to weave that in. I like that. The valley of disappointment. And we've all kind of had those moments, right? Where it just didn't seem like it was going to work. And you know what I would actually say? I would say the valley of disappointment mixed with fatigue is that might be the worst combination.
Yeah.
When you're like tired and things aren't going your way, like you've tried all the different things, you've made all of the pivots, you've done the experimentation and gone back to the drawing board and tried some other shit, but it's still not working. And so maybe you can give us an example, a story, an instance of a moment in your life where you had done like all of the right actions. You had put the work in, you'd showed up consistently. Everything that any guru or successful entrepreneur or athlete would tell you is the key to success. You had done it, but it still wasn't working. Tell me about a moment where that happened, and tell me about how you bounced back from it.
Yeah, man. All of my revelations go back into me just taking time for myself. And that's the problem with most people who are in that fatigue. They even if they're tired, they still don't take rest. And you need that rest, and you need that rest alone so that you can speak to yourself and you can have that conversation with that higher power. And in the moment that I had like that, like I tell this story all the time, I am someone who is very confident. And sometimes that confidence can be to my fault, because when it comes to my belief in mentorship and coaching, I can be quick to invest in a mentor. I could be quick to invest in some coaching. And sometimes it could be the wrong coach and the wrong mentor, but that confidence was like, okay, I'm going to make it back. And I did not always make it back. Right. And it was a moment where I knew I was doing all the right things. I'd have made all the money I needed to. I'd have put all the money in savings so I could invest it in this coaching, and it just did not work out. And just as I was getting frustrated because, you know, this was causing a lot of turmoil in my relationship as well. And I'm ready to kind of like give up. I'm ready to just like go back into like, fine, I guess I'm meant to just go into the work thing and just work a 9 to 5 and just go to work and come home and just spend my time with my family, and that's it. But at the core, I couldn't accept that. I just could not accept that. And it took for me to just find that time with myself. And I was reminded of my time in sports, right? When you are tired and when you find yourself super exhausted after running, let's say a half a mile, but you know that in order for you to win the race, you got to be able to run a mile. What do you have to do? You have to keep running so that your body is used to running past that half a mile. So it's not that you're tired. It's the fact that you think and you say you're tired is why you can't finish. At the end of the day, I myself, and I believe everyone else, is made in the image and likeness of God. So when I say that I'm tired, I'm literally saying God is tired, and God can't be tired, right? God might need rest in this human form, but God can't be tired. So I literally have to remind myself that if I'm made in the image and likeness of God, I'm not tired. I just need to take a step back, reset, and analyze where I am and what I need to do next. Because it's a temporary thing. So you just have to, again, be, do, have. I like how you said that mindset. It's usually, the tasks are big, but it's the mindset that's what stops people. You have to realize that in order for you to have anything, you have to do something. And even before you can do anything, you have to be the person that will typically do those things. Most people are not the person that would do the things it takes to be successful. They're the person that will rather say, but I'm tired. I don't feel like it. Oh, I'm broke. Oh, I'm have all the obstacles stacked against me. I'm subject to this. I'm subject to that. Or was born in the wrong neighborhood, or I was born. And it's like all of that shit built up is literally what makes you built for it. Right? All of the obstacles, all of the judgments, all of the shit that you've been through literally made you hardened for the endurance of what it takes to be an entrepreneur. Like, people who've been through shit literally have the advantage of the people who've been through nothing to become the success. Because in order to have success, you have to have struggle. That's why everything, like I said, that up and down. Like, in order for a stock to go up, no expert stock person is going to buy a stock when they see it at the top. Right? They're usually going to sell it because they know it's going down. And it's like, in order for you to have that success, you have to have struggle. So for people who have struggle, my message for them is you have to continue to do what it takes. You have to continue to become the person that you need to be so that you can do these things, because your struggle is building you for success, whether you know it or not. And a person with kids, it's so funny. I'm gonna share this story before I wrap this up, right? We had an interview with a guy's named Steve Eckert, super militant guy, right? Ex-Marine Corps. And he was telling us how, like, his kids, this guy grew up in the Bronx. He grew up through some shit. And now he has all the things that he wants to be able to provide to his kids. But his kids will never have to go through the things that he had to go through. And the point is not to make them go through that, but he does have to manufacture adversity for them to understand how to go through some shit so that they can become better people. So, like, even for the people who do not have the same, struggles and things like that, you have to create adversity sometimes. And just for the people who naturally adversity finds you, consider yourself lucky, because all you have to do is just build up the willpower and the muscle memory to get through that adversity. And on the other side of it is that success that you're looking for. Yeah.
I love it, man. That's a great episode, man. That's a wrap.
Yeah, that's
a
wrap.
Having you on,
bro. I appreciate you having me on. I appreciate the audience for tapping in with us. And if they ever want to find some more of me, you can find me on IG at Quiy.Speaks. That's QUIY.Speaks, and that's where you can find everything that I got going on.
I love it, brother.
Yeah,
thank you, man.
Yeah, absolutely, bro. I appreciate you, man.
If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the channel. We're having fire conversations every week on the podcast. Before we end the episode, a quick word from our sponsor, Free Agency. What if I told you there is a good chance you're leaving money on the table in your career? It would kind of annoy you a bit, right? Well, Free Agency aims to stop that. They represent and manage talent in the tech industry. Here's how they do it. First, they provide you with a dedicated talent agent. Think about this as your career quarterback. They understand you and your career goals. Based on that understanding, they bring you suitable interviews at top firms. You focus on smashing the interview, and together with their network, research, negotiation expertise, they will make sure you get a top of market salary. Stop job searching alone and start building your dream career today with Free Agency.